Hello and welcome to GMI, the Guitar Music Institute podcast, episode number 56. My name is Brockie, and over the last 4 or 5 years now, perhaps even longer, I've been doing podcasting with people from around the world. And what's great about it is I get to talk to people in countries that I know a little and sometimes that I don't know at all. And this next person I'm talking to is Joáo Paz from Portugal. What's really interesting is how João is a multi-talented individual who not only teaches guitar, which you're going to hear about, but another instrument to an incredibly high degree. He's a lovely man who's steeped in music from his earliest days. So thanks for tuning in to GMI's podcast. I hope you enjoy this interview with João. João, and I think that's pretty close. I'm trying to speak through my nose. It's fantastic to see you. How hard has it been for us to get together today?
Yes, but our industry always prevails.
Exactly. The gods of technology are against us. Well, I've got to say, dear listeners all over the world, but specifically in America, it's got to be said, this is the first time João and I have actually spoken and seen each other face to face. And I'm very excited about this interview because it's the first time I've ever spoken to someone from Portugal. And it's an incredible country, and I want to ask you about it. How does it even survive? I mean, look at Spain. It's all around you. How did it manage to survive?
We have the sea. We have the sea. On the other end, so... and that, actually, that's pretty connected with our story and our past, I believe. Because Portugal went to a lot of traveling around the world. We called it the descobrimentos. I don't know how to translate it right now. But we have been in the Americas, in India, in Japan, and we became a nation of sailors. And I believe that's because we had Spain all around us. So we had nowhere else to turn but to the sea.
Very interesting. And is it true that everyone in Portugal is very small?
No, I don't think so.
Is that an urban legend?
Maybe when I was a teenager, the average age could be a lot smaller than today. But I think we are pretty popular.
You know, these stereotypes. I mean, I remember that when I was 18, I went to Italy, and I'm not very tall. I'm 5'8.5", and that half inch is really important. But I was loving it there because everyone was 5'3". I don't know what that is in meters, but you get the idea.
No, and the kids today are the younger generation. They are pretty tall. I don't know what their dads are feeding them at breakfast, but they grow like mad today.
Yes, they do, but they do have a lot more problems with allergies. But anyway, moving on. João, I want to talk to you about your life as a musician in Portugal. Okay. And just looking over some of the points you put up on the online guitar lessons, because indeed you are one of our tutors on the online guitar lessons GMI.
I'm looking forward to that, Chad.
Yeah, as indeed I am. And it seems to just go out in front of us. It's coming soon, folks. If you are, wherever you are in the world, after you've listened to João, and if you want a lesson with him, you'll be able to get it. You just need to go to onlineguitarlessonsgmi.com. But that's not what this is about today.
Okay.
I just wanted to talk to you about your life as a musician. So, it sounds pretty rich. I'm going to shut up and leave the floor to you.
Okay. I think I had a pretty normal start. I had my first guitar at 11 after a study trip with church school. I was blown away with the animator there playing guitar. He showed me a few chords.
So what is church school?
We called it catechese here.
Is it like Sunday school?
Yes, maybe. Yes, I think so. Sunday school. And the animator on that study trip was playing some regular church tunes. And he taught me a few chords, and I was marveled with that. I came home and I went straight to my father. I want a guitar. I want a guitar. I want a guitar. And he was kind enough. The next day, we head up to a store and he bought me my first acoustic guitar, which was 50 years ago, and I still have that one.
That's an amazing story. How lucky are you to have a dad like that, or are you just spoilt?
My father had a record shop. So we always had music in the house. He was pretty much into classical and jazz. And I remember he always coming home with some records, new things that were coming out. And look, João, this just came out today. And I remember one of those were Pink Floyd, Wish You Were Here, the album. Keith Jarrett's Calling Concert. Things from all over the place musically. It was very fun to grow listening music with my dad, because he was very eclectic, I believe, and without any filters, in the sense that we could switch from classical to jazz to rock to glam rock to pop music to top 10, and it was all fun, all okay.
Fantastic. Do you remember you used to get imports? Do you remember those?
Yes. But music here in Portugal, that time would arrive later. It was some time before. I remember when I was around 18, 19, it all started for me musically for real, as a member in pop rock bands, and following it was the beginning of the 80s. So we were very much into bands like, it was called the Liverpool-Manchester Echo and the Bunnymen, the first albums of U2, the first albums from The Cure, Joy Division. I was into all that stuff.
What kind of hairstyle did you have?
Oh, I had all sorts of hairstyles. Right now it's pretty...
Your hair's looking great. I mean, I was a complete square. I just played guitar. That was it. What a square. I did like Led Zeppelin, and I liked ELO and Blondie, of course.
Yes, of course. Blondie was a part of the post-punk bands that came in, and I remember when I first heard Heart of Glass at a friend's house. Oh, that was fantastic.
I'm sure I was convinced she was in love with me.
I had a few cases like that.
Yeah. Where are they now?
Like Sandy Shaw. When I was a little kid, I was completely in love with Sandy Shaw.
What a great singer, though, eh? That must have been brilliant growing up in that sort of atmosphere with your dad.
Yeah, I think so. It was. In particular, the day when he arrived home with the Keith Jarrett's Calling Concert was fantastic, because he said, "Come to the living room. We are going to listen to this." And we both lied, each one on a couch, and they put the record on, and it was straight to finish in absolute silence, listening to that. And this was 1974, I believe, that Calling Concert came up, so I was 11, 12 by that time. So it was quite a fantastic experience, not only because of the music, but because I was sharing it with my father. That was taking some of his time to give me attention. Things that kids need a lot today,
Absolutely. I find it hard to get past. Were you okay with that?
Oh, yes. In general, yes. You could bring up also Glenn Gould's chair, which you could always listening squeaking in one of those recordings. So yes, it comes with the pack. It's part of the package. Yes, no problem with Keith Jarrett's voice on recordings. Watch him play, it's different. Sometimes it's a bit too much, that standing up, okay, but no problem. In the end, what comes out is fantastic, and that's what matters.
It shows you how small-minded I really am. Yeah. So, from there, you've got your first guitar at 11.
Yes, and I was just playing at home, alone, trying to find things with it. This was the 70s, 80s, so we didn't have the internet.
I was going to say, Bert Whedon.
Sorry?
Bert Whedon, Tune a Day, did you have that?
No, I don't
How
think
about
so.
Mickey Baker, Play Jazz Guitar? Do you remember that book?
No. The only thing I had was I remember a book of chords, and I looked at that and thought, I will never going to learn this stuff, because those were a few, I don't know, dozens of pages with small diagrams of chord after chord after chord, and I looked at that and remember, this makes no sense at all. What am I going to do with this? But eventually, later, I joined a few friends who also had guitars, and it all took off from there.
I know what you're talking about. I remember the first book of chords I had, and I remember the actual chord. It was E flat major, so D major up one. And I looked at that and I thought, I remember thinking, I'll never be able to play that.
Yes, but it was very frustrating. And believe me that because of that experience, that early book of chords, when I teach harmony in my lessons, I have that very much in mind. It's way better to teach people how to get to a chord from a small bass. It's like, you don't mind if I
would love you to. That would be wonderful.
Okay, so
we're just about to hear João playing the guitar.
Can you listen? Can you hear it? Okay.
Can, yes. There's quite a lot of reverb on it, but never mind.
C7 guide tones. Then you had the root. And then just by manipulating the root you get C7, C7 flat 9, C9, C7 sharp 9, then same guide tones with the fifth.
So can you just explain to people who are listening who may not know what guide tones are?
Okay. Guide tones are essentially the two notes that the way I like to think about it is this. If I'm in a band with a bass player, and bass player is taking care of the root of the chord, the minimum amount of notes I need to define that chord properly are two, the third and the seventh of that chord. Okay, so in the case of C7, those would be E and B flat. Now let's imagine I have the bass player here. The bass player plays C. I play E and B flat. And we both together are playing C7.
And the rest is history. I hear Happy Birthday coming on. So, at what point did you start to flesh all this stuff out? Because you were in rock bands in the 80s, weren't you?
Yes. When I was 26, did a lot of concerts in a few rock bands, even got to record our own album, had a small studio at home where I was producing demo tapes for the rock bands of that time in a small Fostex audio 4-track cassette recorder.
Remember those days?
It was amazing, but at some point I felt I needed to learn music.
So before you gloss over all this rock stuff, what happened to the band? What were you called for a start?
The two most important bands were called Pressuposto, which could translate to something like prayer and its opposite. Okay?
What's the opposite of prayer? Anti-prayer.
That was a post-punk band.
Good.
And later, in a band with my wife and a bass player, a friend bass player, as a trio, we were in a band called Terra Mar, which is called Land, or Sea Land, which was a representation of Portugal, let's say, the land by the sea. So Terra Mar. And we played a lot of pop mixed with our popular song Fado. So it was a mix of rock, pop, fado. It was a style that was emerging in those days of modern popular music in Portugal, which was around the beginning of the 80s, 83, 84. It was all coming out, and we were on that wave.
So what was the music scene like in Portugal, João, and what is it like now?
It was wonderful, I believe, up to a point. It was incredible from, I'm speaking from my point of view, okay, from a rock musician by that time. Right after 74, which was the revolution which ended the dictatorship in Portugal. It was a time of experiment, and everybody was working on new things and releasing new music, etc. So that was amazing. And it worked pretty well for maybe 10 years. But then looking back, I felt that the record industry immediately took control of that. And it all became much more institutionalized, and it lost a lot of that early raw quality.
Was there an issue or not with regards the language used? I mean, is there a big enough population in Portugal to support a Portuguese-only language record scene? Maybe.
In those days, we and most bands would sing a lot in English, and Portuguese people liked to speak foreign languages, so we were thrilled to sing in English, no problem at all. But then, at some point, everybody turned to Portuguese, and you're right, Portugal is a small country, but we had Brazil, we had Spain, and in a sense, we could understand each other properly. In Brazil, you speak Portuguese, but Spain, we can have easily a conversation with the Spanish people and understand each other pretty well. So that opened some market for more concerts, and people were interested in our language, in our musical traditions. So that was okay. The problem with it being a small country was that in terms of sales, it was always terrible. Distribution and to jump to the outside world was pretty much terrible, very difficult. Only a handful of bands managed to become internationally recognized.
And I guess in terms of the way that Western music actually functioned, the UK and America would have it sewn up. Was it difficult for you to infiltrate into that?
Of course, completely. For us and for most of bands here in Portugal. On our personal case, we went as far as Spain and gave lots of concerts in Spain, more even than in Portugal maybe. But we didn't get to the UK and certainly not to the USA. Some bands in Portugal did. But again, it was pretty much with the help of the Portuguese colonies in the United States, for instance, or in France, inviting the Portuguese bands to play there. Today it's very different because everyone can pretty much do everything online, and as long as you have enough followers and social media, it's a completely new world. And I don't very much enjoy it, the status of music today.
I guess, at the risk of sounding like an old man, which I am fast becoming, at least back then, people were actually in front of real people. I mean, it seems to me that the big deal now is to have a million views on Instagram, but there's no real connection, is there?
Yes. Back then, and I'm risk sounding like an old man too, musicians had to play. Musicians had to transcribe music. If I wanted to learn a music, I had to lie on the floor with a tape recorder close to my radio and wait for a music to come up on the radio and have the luck to record it and then try to learn it from the tape. Today, you pretty much go to the internet, you download the chords, you download the sheet music, you download the recordings, etc. And even worse than that, I feel that much of music today, it's in the hands of the ones who know how to promote it better. And that becomes a business in itself, and music seems to come afterwards, and it's not the driving force. But I may be wrong.
Well, you may be wrong, but I'm certainly in the same camp as you are. Now, what happened that you started to study classical guitar? And you, by the way, you also have got a degree in violin. Perhaps you could tell the listeners a little about all of this.
Okay. So, by the time I was 26, and I could afford my own lessons, I went to a music school and inscribed myself and started learning classical guitar and theory. I wanted to learn and learn how to read and write music. So the problem was that classical guitar lessons were. I'll tell you what happened. I had a teacher who asked me taught me the right hand technique. And I had to spend 3 or 4 months just perfecting that movement, fingers and thumb. Then school switched teachers. Another one came up, and he looked at my right hand and he said, "That hand is all wrong. So you got to spend another 6 months. Now turn your hand into this position." Okay. After a few months, another teacher came, and before he told me that my right hand was wrong.
Was this place some sort of concentration camp? You were in a torture cell.
Yes, you could say so. So what happened was that I had a violin at home. My wife, for fun, gave me one violin for Christmas, and by that time, when this was happening at music school, all those problems with the guitar, there came a summer course for violin, and I started doing that summer course and loved it. And suddenly all those problems, technical problems that were preventing me from play music, I was just basically spent months just plucking strings with my right hand on the guitar. Those went away. I put my guitar to rest on its case for 15 years, and I started learning violin. And it wasn't and it isn't still my main instrument, but somehow it became my profession. I did a professional course, and after finishing that course, my teacher asked me to assist him on a few lessons with his young students. I started doing that, so it naturally came up. And I became a violin teacher, which I've been doing for some 30 years now, I believe.
So you still teach violin?
Yes, I do.
Now, João, looking back on those classical guitar teachers and everyone giving you different advice, now that you are a guitarist of some note and you've gone through the whole thing, what do you think about the advice you were given?
In terms of guitar?
Just in terms of technique. I mean, they kept giving you different advice. Very confusing for a young person. Can you look back and say that guy was right and this guy was wrong? Or
to a certain extent, they all those teachers had great points and some not so great points. What I feel it lacked a lot in the classical guitar teaching back then was a structure of a method to follow. As soon as I got to violin, started learning violin, I got immediately all those books of scales, studies, pieces. I started also following the Suzuki violin method, which it's a very organic method from of teaching and learning. You learn by listening, and you memorize tunes, and you learn like you learn to speak. Okay. If you try to learn Japanese now, it may be a really, really hard experience. But matter of fact is that in Japan there are thousands of young children who speak Japanese. So what happens? They grow up listening to that and speaking of that. And if a Japanese child has a Japanese father and a Chinese mother, maybe learn speaking both languages. It comes out of necessity, and it comes out of experience. So the Suzuki violin method brought me a lot of that experience, and I would like to think that I can apply that to guitar as well.
Yes, it's about 5 or 6 years ago now. I got the opportunity. I was lucky to interview a good friend of mine called Philip Thorne, and he's kind of the granddaddy of Scottish classical guitar. And I was absolutely blown away when one day he said to me at a place where we were teaching that the classical guitar didn't really have a set sort of method of teaching, because I thought that was incredible, and that he was one of the guys that actually put a lot of things in place up here, which really, with the violin and the hundreds of years of development, you would think it would just be a given that it would be then classical guitar.
Yes. I hope I'm not being... that was about those teachers I got and not about the classical world in guitar itself, because of course there are methods, of course there are study books, of course there are, and later in life I met people who have great methodology for teaching guitar. I just didn't find that in that time when I started learning guitar, and that's why I switched to violin.
Now, going back to what you said earlier, you talked about how your dad introduced you to jazz, and you would listen to jazz as a young boy. Now, I'm assuming that must have had a lasting impact, because you went on to study jazz guitar and study with some heavy-duty players.
Yes, but when I was listening to music with my daddy, we wouldn't talk about jazz, rock. We just listened to music. So if that was jazz for me, or classical, or prog rock, or whatever, it was all fine. Okay, so I didn't make the connection. Okay, this is jazz. I loved that record. That made part of my life, and that distinction came later, much later. So, what happened was that during the pop rock days, I got a jazz box, a Washburn guitar, a 17-inch archtop, and played rock with it. And then when I started violin, I put it on a case. Much later in life, I was constantly listening to jazz on driving on my car between home and school, and I started really getting into that. And I thought I would love to learn this. And at first I thought I need to learn saxophone. But then I remembered, no, man, I have a guitar at home, a jazz guitar at home.
It's funny you should say that, because every time, small venues and that say, we need jazz, they always, even if it's like a guitar duo, they'll have a saxophonist on.
Yes.
I don't know why that is. It doesn't matter where in the world you are, they always do that.
So one day I came home, I opened the case of the guitar that had been lying there for 15 years, and we already had the internet, and I went searching for jazz guitar. And the first thing that came up was Jimmy Bruno, who had a school, an online school back then. And I joined and went from there. And never stopped since, and love it more and more. And every day I feel I know less and less.
Yeah, join the club. So, but you did go to London to do
Yes.
a diploma in 2015. How was that experience? Tell me about that, and what made you go, actually?
I don't know how that came to my attention. Maybe it was one of my teachers online. I started having jazz guitar lessons with a guy called Matt Warnock.
I know that name. Is he a big online presence?
Yeah, he has a huge online presence. And we had Skype lessons, and we did it for a couple of years. And he told me, you should go try this exam.
Okay.
And he was very much into it, preparing students to do that exam. So we started working for that. And after a couple of years, he told me, "You're more than ready. Go and do your exam." Because I was procrastinating. I was learning things. This takes me to another subject, which is adult learning. So I was doing all the wrong things. He would tell me, do this, and I would go home and okay, but if I do just that, and not properly following the instructions I was getting from my teacher, and one day he told me, okay, you're going to do the exam next December. We had a 3-month window frame, and suddenly in those 3 months I had to get rid of all the nonsense I was doing in guitar and concentrate on properly getting ready for the exam, and it was great. It was a great trip. I felt I was prepared to do it, and it was a nice experience overall. And there are a few more exams in that line, and I intend to do them too later.
I know that teaching is your passion, and you started in '95. How do you feel about teaching? I mean, nowadays I tend to feel people cherry pick now. They take little bits and pieces from the internet. If you were talking, well, you're talking to people who are listening around the world. Some may be thinking about taking up the guitar or indeed any other instrument. What would you say to them, João, in terms of getting an actual teacher as opposed to just learning online?
The problem with learning online is that you have no criteria, and you have to be the teacher and the student at the same time, because you have to devise what you should be doing next. And for the most part, it doesn't work. I firmly believe that it is a much better solution to pick a teacher, start with it, stick with it, trust in him or her, and go with it for some time. Give it a period of test, even if you don't follow everything or agree with everything. I believe that any method is potentially good, but you need to have a method. You need to have a core set of material that you come back to, that you always come back to develop other things, like a tree. Okay, you have the trunk and you have the branches and the leaves. You need to have the trunk of the tree. And with online learning, people who try to do it by themselves online, although you have a myriad of material, I feel it's like growing a tree starting from the leaves with no roots, and everything is disconnected, and it's terrible, and it becomes frustrating after some time.
Do you know what I find really interesting is that there is so much material out there. You alluded to it earlier that back in the day there wasn't a lot, there wasn't a lot of books, there wasn't any internet, but somehow you found things out, and you did find books, and you got teachers. Now the amount of stuff out there is just unbelievable, and yet at a university people are coming in to learn music. They don't know anything.
There's one funny thing now in the guitar world. If you see, there are a lot of emerging young guys with absolutely amazing, mind-blowing technique, capable of doing things that look beyond magic on the guitar. But the funny thing is, when I went to listen to some interviews by some of those guys, they all mentioned having someone in their life, their father. Almost all the time their father was a musician and started him or her in learning the guitar. And then it's like I was saying, their father worked like the trunk of the tree, and then they went online to furthermore enhance their knowledge. And there are wonderful things online, but I think you need to have the human experience too, and you need to have someone who takes care of the artwork from you.
Now, do you teach in Lisbon?
Yes, yeah, and I live in Lisbon. And I teach here online, and I teach presentially in Porto. Ah, right. So which was my first 300 kilometers.
Wow.
So I go there every week. I go on Tuesdays and come back on Thursdays and teach at school there.
That's fantastic. And is it by the sea?
Yes, it is.
How fortunate.
So we lived there, and we came to Lisbon some 7 years ago. So I moved to Lisbon, but kept my jobs in Porto.
Would you like to play something?
Okay.
I've really put João on the spot here because I didn't say I was going to ask him to play something, but he has got his guitar in his hand, so it might be nice to hear him. Great, man. Thanks. Down That Dream. What a great tune.
Thank you.
Absolutely wonderful. I hope you enjoyed that at home. I think we're I'm going to sort of wrap this up soon, João. Tell me just a little about your hopes for the future and how things are in Portugal in terms of jazz guitar.
I think they are great now. We have a few schools here in Lisbon. We have great teachers and we have some really nice musicians. And I think it's a bit like everywhere else in the world. It's a great music, but you don't have that much people. You don't have that much market. So it's a bit underground always. And I kind of like it that way. You know, we were talking about the status of music and technology today. And I feel that jazz, in a sense like classical, brings humanity to the music experience, because I like music that I listen to and that I can identify the players. There's a drummer there, there's a bass player there, you have a trumpet there, you have a flugelhorn there, you have a piano, you have a Rhodes, etc. But in most of pop music today, you have sounds that don't necessarily translate to musicians. You can just fire a digital audio workstation and record a few notes from a piano, play a double bass on a piano, play a trumpet on a piano, and record just a few notes and mix it all together, and not having real people playing. I love the experience of real people playing, and I love the sounds of the old records from the 60s, where they had that hard stereo panning when you would listen to the drums and the bass on the left channel, absolutely, and then the sax and piano on the right channel or whatever. That separation, giving a place to everyone, it's a wonderful thing. Being able to identify, and I guess that that's about communication. You need to have someone to communicate with someone. It's a conversation always. If you lose that human part, it stops being a conversation and it's not so funny anymore.
Where is it heading, Portugal, in terms of its music provision?
I think it's hard because if you turn on the radio, you always listen to the same type of music. And that's very much pop with auto-tune on the voices, the same effects, the same sounds. You turn a station and it's like the same music, and you turn to another radio station and it's that same music again and again and again and again and again. And you have so much offer that it's hard for the music that matters to surface sometimes. Back in the 80s, it was terrible to launch a musical career, and it was really hard to have an album recorded, etc. But those who managed to get there had done their work, and that's something to say, and probably most of that music was good in a sense. Today the process is so much democratic. I'll add some quotes here to the democratic word, that allows everyone to produce music, release music, and not properly being innovating in music. So I feel that's a problem in Portugal, and not only in Portugal, because when I turn the television and I switch to the music channels, I feel that most of the time they're always playing the same type of music, the same dance music, the same trance music, the same effects on the same instruments, the same voices, the same effects on the voices.
So, João, just before we end, at the top of this interview, I talked about online guitar lessons, GMI. This is something that you are part of, and I'm delighted that you are part of it, and I'm excited that you're part of it, because we need people who love music and are great guitar players. This is your chance just to speak to the audience, I guess, and say, although we've not launched yet, why should someone come and get some lessons from you specifically? What's your...
Okay. My lessons are aimed at beginners and eventually beginner intermediate guitarists. I'm a dedicated teacher. Okay, I go to war for my students. My work goes always way beyond the time of the class, preparing material, making things work so that students can concentrate on actually playing and learning and not having to do all that digging for themselves. So I concentrate on that. I love to teach the basics, and I feel that a sound beginning will do wonders for your playing later. And people need to learn the basics, and that's what I try to give them big time. I've spent the past 10 or 15 years just investigating the basics, what you should learn, how you should learn it, how you should step by step acquire the material that will eventually transform you in a good guitarist. So if everyone learns the basics properly, I try to give people the trunk of the tree. Okay, back to my image before.
Joáo Paz, thanks very much for your time.
Jed, that was wonderful talking to you, and hope to see you soon.
Well, there you have it, folks. That's episode number 56 done. I hope you enjoyed that. It was lovely talking to João, learning all about his family, his culture, and not just about the differences, but the similarities, no matter where we are in the world. His love of music, his love of tuition. I'm going to be back reasonably soon. I've got a very interesting character who I bumped into in the street. I know that sounds mad, but it all will be revealed. He's got an incredible story to tell, and I hope you tune in to episode 57. But for now, thanks for listening. Wherever you are in the world, best wishes, and speak to you hopefully soon.